Hi everyone, this is a YouTube video about door hardware through time. The purpose of this video is to help you understand the chronology of door hardware, specifically latches, with the exception of plate latches. Because where I live, those are relatively rare, much more rare than the regular kinds of latches that we'll be looking at. And just wanted to say a few things about why I'm putting this together. I often look at reports that are done by my competitors to learn about the chronology of other buildings that I haven't been to. And one of the things that I've noticed is it's very common for door hardware to not even be mentioned in these reports. And this indicates that the people who did the report weren't familiar or they didn't think that the door hardware was important. And I'll just show you just real quickly. If you see a piece of door hardware like this is something that can help you to understand, for example, whether a house has been renovated. Is this original to the section? It brings in an opportunity for people in my field to display their expertise about the construction of a house. This is important because often you can see that changes have taken place in a house, and very frequently if you look at details of things that are clearly not original to the house, you can understand or at least come up with a safe estimate about when the house was renovated. What I have planned out for this particular episode is an overview of door latches. Now it just happens that this is a linear progression. Every time a new door latch was introduced, the door latch in production at the time went out of production fairly quickly. That makes it fairly simple to narrow down into convenient time blocks when a particular type of latch was in production. One thing I'd like to point out is not a lot has been written about the history of door hardware. Henry Mercer wrote a book about a century ago about how to date a house. And in that book, he laid out certain general parameters of door hardware. What I would like to do for this YouTube video is to give you more information than Mercer included in his book. For example, this one type of latch, which is called a Blake latch, was in production a little over a century. And Mercer mentions some of the highlights about this particular latch. What he didn't go into, though, was this latch falls into three phases. The first phase is a little more complicated than the latter two. Okay, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. Why don't we just hop into the very first phase of latches in the United States. These are the Suffolk latches, which were particularly common in the 1700s, but they were also in production in the very early 1800s, but had seemed to have really gone out of production by 1810. At one time it was thought that Suffolk latches, and in fact all latches, in North America before the War of 1812 were made in England. And this shows up in multiple books that have been written. These books often reference the fact that the British parliamentary laws forbade the people in the colonies from making certain types of iron products, including latches. But over the course of the past 2 decades, individual instances have been noted of people producing iron hardware like this. So we do know that it was happening. And after you've seen several hundred of these Suffolk latches, you will notice that some of them are significantly lower in quality than the other ones, and those were probably ones that were made here in the colonies. So let's take a look at a Suffolk latch. This is a typical example. This is the most common example in Pennsylvania. And I'm going to go into the definitions of what to expect with a Suffolk latch here and all the pieces. The upper and lower parts of a Suffolk latch are called the cusps, and I'm showing here the upper cusp and the lower cusp. This is the front side of a Suffolk latch. And let's look up at the upper cusp. You can see the thumb piece, and this is the handle. And I'll put my hand in here and you'll see that when I press the thumb piece, it raises this bar on the back. So now let's look at the back side. This is a typical back side of a Suffolk latch, and this piece is called the latch bar, which raises and lowers. When you press the thumb piece, this little piece called the lever bar goes up, which raises the latch bar. And when the latch bar is down, is held in place by a little piece that's called the keeper. Sometimes some people call it the receiver. The cusps come in a variety of shapes and sizes. The ones that are oval shaped like this are generally called a bean cusp. This latch has an oversized bean cusp that was made in Berks County, Pennsylvania. Other common shapes are triangular, diamond-shaped, and especially in German areas in Pennsylvania, the cusp can have really ornate designs. The next type of latch was the Norfolk latch, which was in production in the United States from 1795 to 1845. This was a design that actually existed in England in medieval times, and the way you can tell the difference between ones from the early 19th century, this phase, and the earlier phases are that the other ones were dramatically larger. These are remarkably small. You can just fit your hand inside the handle. The Norfolk latch came about because of changes in iron-making technology, which made it possible to produce iron plate, and the various pieces are mounted onto this iron plate. Something new with the Norfolk latch is that producers would sometimes put their name on the back side of it, which would face the door, so that you wouldn't actually be able to read it until it's removed from the door, and that would be in the location of the blue circle. Another thing interesting about the Norfolk latch is the iron plate is often just rectangular. Sometimes it has rounded corners. This one has a fleur-de-lis at the top, and if you look at the bottom, you'll see that it's been stamped out of a larger piece, and it has the top of the fleur-de-lis of the next piece below it. The Norfolk latch was in production for half a century, and for some reason near the end of its period of production, it kind of fell from favor. And I've been in several Greek revival houses that actually don't have any Norfolk latches anywhere in the building. And this is the Norfolk latch, which is in the Lizzie Borden house, where Lizzie Borden's father and stepmother were killed in the 1890s. The Blake latch represented the third phase of door latches in America. It was introduced in 1840 and remained in heavy use until World War II. Improvements in the design make it possible to divide its production into 3 time frames. You may recall that I wrote a blog post about the Blake latch a few years ago. I'm adding a few additional details here. An article in Scientific American in 1880 described how the Blake latch was invented in 1840. 3 brothers named Philos Blake, Eli W. Blake, and John A. Blake were nephews of Eli Whitney, and they had operated Whitney's gun factory in Whitneyville from 1825 to 1836. One of the 3 brothers later wrote this, quote, "I found it was necessary to invent something. Going to the city of New Haven, I went into a hardware store and asked the salesman to show me the worst made article of general use. He at once handed me a Norfolk latch. I bought it, took it home, and in a short time made the present latch." The 3 brothers actually collaborated in the design of the original latch, and patent number 1704 was issued under all 3 names. Their design involved a cast iron handle and thumb piece reminiscent of the Suffolk latch. Originally, the thumb piece rested in a slot at the top of the handle. The design was universally recognized as a tremendous improvement over the Norfolk latch, and Henry Mercer, that I mentioned earlier, called this one of America's greatest contributions. The original design was in production from 1840 until circa 1870. Here is the patent sketch the Blake brothers submitted for their patent. A problem developed with the upper cusp. After heavy use, the latch would crack at the top and eventually break. As a result, By the time of the Civil War, the Blake latch was disappearing from the front doors of houses. During the first phase of the Blake latch, some manufacturers added decoration to the handle, as you see here. The Blake brothers tried various means of improving the upper cusp. This Blake latch from circa 1860 has an enlarged upper cusp as well as a thicker area of iron around where the thumb piece would have gone. Around 1870, the upper cusp was enlarged again. The second phase of the Blake latch, which is the most common to find today, was in production from circa 1870 to circa 1905. For a time in the late 19th century, Eastlake decoration was applied to some Blake latches, like this example, the second phase. It was not particularly popular for houses, being limited to attic doors, such as in this example, but it's commonly found on the doors of outbuildings. Here is an oversized example formerly in a barn in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. In 1900, the design shifted again. The first evidence I've found of the third phase comes from a hardware catalog from the year 1900. Blake latches in the third phase have a round upper cusp that is convex for added support. Blake latches from the third phase are not commonly found in houses. One appeared in a house originally built in the 1690s that was featured on a show on HGTV when it was renovated recently. The host said that the latch was original to the house, but I guarantee you that this latch was not in production in the 1690s, or for that matter, any time prior to the 1890s. The third phase remained in production for a few decades, with production being phased out during the Depression. Okay, there you have it. This is an overview of the types of latches in American history. This gives you an opportunity to understand what types of latches you would expect to find in houses of various time periods. So I hope that you found this video helpful, and if so, I hope you will give me a thumbs up and subscribe or leave me a comments below. Okay, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video.